Last week when Reverend Leong asked me, well, this week is a real bilingual service and you need to speak Cantonese too. So,
梁牧師話：我如果你講道嘅時候咧，要用廣東話講，咁我都冇辦法啦。
You know, I can understand Cantonese, especially preaching and praying. 禱告啊，講道啊，識少少啦，講唔得噶啦。
牧師講道同埋禱告咧，都可以廣東話都得嘅，但係其他可能就唔掂啦。
I can understand Reverend Leong's preaching most of it. I would say 80% of it.
劉牧師講道，我通常可以明80%嘅。
But he gave me a requirement. He said, when you say the blessing, and it can not be translated, and blessing has to be from the original one. So I will try to give a blessing also in Cantonese.
咁佢話當你祝福嗰陣時候咧，你要用翻呢個廣東話，所以咁我可能今日會嘗試用廣東話祝福。
Let me tell you a trade secret. How do I do that? I use 拼音。
我係用拼音嚟到係幫我嘅。
Let us read today's passage together.
讓我哋一齊嚟到讀神嘅話語。
Let us stand.
讓我哋一同起立。
We'll read in English first, and then in Cantonese.
我哋首先會用英文讀，然之後我哋會用廣東話讀。
Of Solomon, Psalm 72:1. Let's read. Endow the king with your justice, O God, the royal son, with your righteousness. May he judge your people in righteousness, your afflicted one with justice.
所羅門的詩篇72篇1節。神啊，求你將判斷的權柄賜給王，將公義賜給王的兒子。他要按公義審判你的民，按公平審判你的困苦人。
Second passage is from Proverbs 1.
第二段經文係箴言第1章。
Let's read together. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel.For gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. And let wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance, for understanding proverbs,and parables, and saying and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and the fools despise wisdom and instruction. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They will be a garland to grace your head, and a chain adorn your neck. In Cantonese,
以色列王大衛兒子所羅門的箴言，要使人曉得智慧和訓誨，分辨通達的言語，使人處事領受智慧、仁義、公平、正直的訓誨，使愚人靈明，使少年人有知識和謀略，使智慧人聽見，增長學問，使聰明人得着智謀，使人明白箴言和譬喻。懂得智慧人的言語和謎語，敬畏耶和華是知識的開端，愚妄人藐視智慧和訓誨。我兒要聽你父親的訓誨，不可離棄你母親的法則，因為這要作你頭上的華冠，你角上的金鏈。
Please be seated.
請坐。
Today I would like to share with you a kind of a unique topic, Poetries and Histories, Knowing Solomon.
今日想同大家分享一個比較特別啲嘅題目，呢個題目就係話讀詩讀史識所羅門。
That's hard, isn't it? Especially the 詩史事。
尤其是呢個詩史事，好難，有時好難讀。
Yeah, it's very hard. Actually, in Mandarin, just this word, you know, the Hu Shizhi actually wrote a whole article called 诗事实施史。
喺呢一個中國文學裏邊，有人係用咗呢個詩史事時嗰度係寫咗幾百個字。
Yeah, Mr. Shi wrote the poetry of history of lion. 诗事实施史。
係用呢幾個字嚟到係寫咗一個好特別嘅一首詩。
And indeed, when we read, it's a very large portion of the Bible is in poetic format.
其實我哋睇聖經嘅時候，好大部分嗰個聖經都係一個詩篇嘅形式嘅。
How do we read it? How do we understand it?
但我哋點樣去讀？我哋點樣去明白佢呢？
Especially recently, our Pastor Liang has preached on Ecclesiastes. That's another very hard English turn to Ecclesiastes.
最近梁牧師又同我哋分享咗呢個傳道書，其實傳道書亦都係好難明嘅。
It's not easy to understand.
唔係好容易明白嘅一本書。
And in our English session, Pastor Ryan has been preaching on Job.
喺英文嗰邊，Ryan 牧師又喺度講緊呢一個約伯記。
And in Mandarin session, and Pastor Yang has been preaching on the prayers, and he mentioned about the prayers of Solomon.
楊牧師喺國語崇拜裏邊亦都係講到關於祈禱係所羅門嘅祈禱。
So I'll say, let me attempt to give an overview on the poetic format in the Bible and how do we understand it.
咁我就想嘗試嚟到係用呢一個係聖經裏邊嘅詩卷嚟到做一個總覽，嚟到係點樣去明白呢啲詩卷呢？
So when we read poetry, we need to link that to histories.
當我哋讀啲詩篇嘅時候咧，我哋要去跟翻去佢哋嘅歷史背景。
And there's a saying by Francis Bacon, as a 16th century English philosopher.
喺呢個16世紀有一個英國嘅哲學家叫做培根，佢咁話。
He says, histories make men wise.
佢話讀史使人明智
Poets witty.
讀詩使人聰慧
The mathematics subtle.
學習數學使人精密
Natural philosophy deep. Back then, the natural philosophy really means physics.
物理學使人深刻
Moral grave.
倫理學使人高尚
And logic and rhetoric able to contend.
邏輯修辭使人善辯
And last few words actually is in Latin. Bilton studia in mores.
總之就係知識能夠係塑造人嘅性格。
Basically means the knowledge and the study build up your character.
你嘅知識係可以做咗你嘅人嘅性格。
So we need to learn the history and the poetry and especially when we link these two together and then make us not only wise but also witty.
當我哋去讀詩篇同埋讀歷史嘅時候咧，唔單止可以讓我哋係能夠有明智，都讓我哋能夠有聰慧。
As we read through the Bible, we see there's a very large portion of the Bible is called wisdom literature.
當我哋睇聖經嘅時候，聖經裏邊有一部分嘅著作係叫做一啲智慧嘅文學。
In the wisdom literature, most of them are in poetic format.
呢啲智慧嘅文學好多時候佢哋係用詩篇嘅形式嚟到係寫嘅。
Either poetry or elevated prose.
係多數都係用一啲好似寫詩咁樣嚟到係表達。
詩或者是很文雅的散文。
詩係用詩或者係用啲文雅嘅散文嚟寫嘅。
So in this block of a Bible is from Job to Song of Songs.
係由約伯記去到雅歌呢一度。
And Job is very unique.
約伯記係好特別嘅。
Job is probably the oldest book in the Bible, even older than Genesis.
約伯記可能係最古老嘅一個嘅書卷喺聖經裏邊，其實係可能係仲舊過創世記。
And there are many parallels to ancient Near East wisdoms.
喺呢一個約伯記嗰度係講到好多關於以前古代喺呢、
近東
近東呢個地方。
And it touched upon a very unique topic is God's sovereignty and man's sufferings.
呢度係講到係神嘅主權同埋人嗰個嘅苦難。
And so if you are interested, which I do, I listen to 9:15 the English sermon quite frequently if I don't go out and preach.
如果你有興趣嘅話咧，其實英文牧師係已經講過呢個約伯記。
Pastor Ryan has done a great job.
Ryan 牧師係實在係講得好好。
And then there are 4 books, and it's from Proverbs, Psalm, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs.
跟住仲有詩篇、箴言、傳道書同埋雅歌。
And have you noticed that who are the authors?
當你
for these
睇呢
4
4卷
books?
書嘅時候，個作者究竟係邊個咧？
Actually, in a very long history of Israel's history, these are only 2 people.
喺以色列咁長嘅歷史裏邊，好似淨係有2個主要嘅人物。
It's called United Kingdom.
係呢一個聯合嘅一個嘅國家。
統一王朝，
同一個王朝。
And during the United Kingdom, there are 2 great kings in Jewish and Israel's their history is King David and King Solomon.
喺呢個聯合王朝裏邊呢，個主要嘅2個皇帝咧就係呢一個掃羅王同埋大衛王。
So from Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs, and David wrote most of Psalms.
喺呢咁多本書裏邊，詩篇嚟講，大衛係寫得最多嘅。
But David is not the only author.
但係詩篇唔係全部都係大衛寫嘅。
Who else are the author?
仲有邊個寫咧？
Descendant of Korah. You know that?
可拉嘅後裔。
And Solomon also wrote 2 of those songs.
所羅門都寫咗兩章嘅經文。
And we just read one, Psalm 71.
呢個詩篇第71篇。
And then remaining of that, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs are all written traditionally by Solomon.
呢個箴言、傳道書同埋雅歌，通通都係所羅門寫嘅。
So we can say Solomon is the king of poetic literature.
所以我哋可以話所羅門咧就係呢一個呢啲書本裏邊嘅一個嘅皇帝。
So whenever we read a song, read a song, read a poetry, a poem, and we will try to link that to the historical background of it, then we can understand that song even more.
每當我哋讀詩篇嘅時候，我哋就要去睇下當時候嗰個歷史嘅背景，咁我哋就會更加明白呢個詩篇嘅意思。
So when we turn to 1 Samuel chapter 17,
當我哋睇到撒母耳記上第17章嘅時候，
and that's historical account.
係講到呢個歷史嘅背景。
David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep, and when a lion and a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, and I went after it and struck it and rescued the sheep from the mouth. And when it turned on me, I seized it and by the hair and struck it and even killed it."
喺34節同35節咁話，佢話大衛對掃羅說：你僕人為父親放羊，有時來了獅子，有時來了熊，從群中吃一隻羊羔去。我就追趕他，擊打他，將羊羔從他口中救出來。他起來要害我，我就抽着他的胡子，將他打死。
That happens during the time when King David at that time was not king yet. He was just shepherd boy.
係呢個事係幾時發生呢？就係大衛當時候都仲未係做王，佢只不過係一個牧羊人啫。
And Saul was the king.
當時候掃羅係皇帝。
But they faced an enemy, the giant Goliath.
但係記得佢哋面對一個呢個巨大嘅敵人係哥利亞。
Seeing that giant, all the soldiers of the Jewish and the Israelites, their soldiers are so afraid of that giant.
嗰啲以色列嗰啲軍人全部都好怕呢一個哥利亞。
But the shepherd boy and David is the only one volunteered.
但係呢個大衛呢個牧羊人佢又唔驚喎。
But Saul saw that shepherd boy is not that very tall, not like the hero Saul. Saul is a very tall guy, but David is not. You just a teenage boy, a shepherd boy. How can you to fight with that giant?
掃羅其實當時候都好猶豫，因為佢覺得掃羅自己本身都係好高大，但係大衛就好細，身體比較細啲。但佢話你咁細嘅身體，你點可以同呢個哥利亞打呢？
So here's the background. And David said to Saul, well, even I'm a shepherd, but whenever there's a bear or a lion try to kill my lamb, I will rescue that lamb from their mouths and even kill the bear and the lion.
但係大衛就同掃羅咁講，佢話：我看羊嘅時候，如果有獅子同老虎嚟去襲擊呢啲羊嘅時候，我就會從呢啲獅子老虎裏邊嚟到係將隻羊救翻出嚟。
That is why the God Yahweh, Jehovah God said, David is the one after my own heart.
呢個就係點解耶和華就係講到大衛就係合乎神心意嘅一個人。
David is the shepherd for the kingdom.
大衛就係呢一個國度裏邊嘅一個嘅牧羊人。
God wants a leader, a king is a shepherd.
神需要嘅領導人係一個牧羊人，
not a hero.
唔係一個英雄。
So that's why when we continue on to read the Psalm,
當我哋繼續去睇詩篇嘅時候，
the Psalm 23,
詩篇23篇，
we're all familiar with that. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters.
耶和華是我的牧者，我必不致缺乏。他使我躺臥在青草地上，領我在可安歇的水邊。
So King David is the shepherd after God's own heart.
大衛王就係一個追隨神心意嘅牧羊人。
Because God Himself, Yahweh God Himself, is the shepherd of the nation.
因為耶和華本身佢自己就係呢一個國度裏邊嘅牧人。
Now let's fast forward.
我哋行快啲去前邊睇下。
To David, his repentance.
我哋睇下大衛點樣嚟到係悔改。
And when we read Psalm 51,
當我哋睇詩篇第51篇嘅時候
Psalm 51 we read, Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according unto the multitude thy tender mercy. Blot out my transgression, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity. And probably you will say, what is the background of that?
呢度開頭嗰一兩節佢話：神啊，求你按你嘅慈愛憐憫我，憐恤我，按你嘅豐盛嘅慈悲塗抹我嘅過犯，求你將我嘅罪孽洗淨淨盡。咁呢個究竟係咩意思呢？
So obviously this one is a repentant psalm.
我哋好明顯睇到呢一個係一個悔改嘅詩篇。
But what is the background behind that?
咁但係個背景又係乜嘢呢？
So when we read the Bible, not only the large character, we also need to read fine print.
當我哋睇聖經嘅時候，我哋唔係淨係單單睇嗰啲大嘅字，有時
When
啲
you
細
turn
嘅
to
字我
your
哋都要睇
Bible,
嘅。
Psalm 51, the large character, then you see the fine print says, For the director of music, a psalm of David. And what? When the prophet Nathan came to him after David had committed adultery with Bathsheba.
因為呢一個詩篇51篇嘅前面嗰度咧，有少少嘅細字，嗰度就講佢話：大衛與拔示巴同室以後，先知拿單來見他，他作這詩交與伶長。
So from poetry, let's link back to history.
所以我睇到從詩篇去到歷史。
And in history account, in 2 Samuel,
我哋睇到撒母耳記下
one evening, David got up. He already became a king. He got up and walking on his balcony I think because the palace is taller, higher than most of other people's rooftop. So he was walking on his balcony and saw someone is lower, and the rooftop there's a beautiful woman is taking bath.
咁大衛嗰陣時候已經做咗王啦。咁佢有一晚佢出去上去佢個屋頂裏邊係散步嘅時候，就望落去下邊，見到有一個好靚嘅女仔喺度沖緊涼。
Make the long story short.
咁長話短説。
He found out that the wife of one of his soldiers, Uriah, and Uriah is fighting in the front line, and his wife is at home.
佢就去揾到呢一個美女，佢原來佢個丈夫就係佢個軍人裏邊一個嘅軍人嘅名叫做烏利亞，喺前線嗰度打緊仗。
And the woman, Bathsheba, is beautiful.
呢個拔士巴係好靚。
So the David had a desire, sexual desire, and took Bathsheba into his palace.
咁大衛咧就起咗呢個淫念，要將拔士巴帶到佢皇宮裏邊。
And had adulterous relationship with Bathsheba.
同佢係犯咗呢一個奸淫嘅行為。
If he did everything that undercover, nobody else will know.
如果佢係咁樣做嘅時候，如果佢其實可以遮瞞得到嘅。
And then Bathsheba was pregnant.
但係拔士巴大咗肚。
Oh no!
慘啦！
Her husband is in the front line, haven't come home for months. How come Bathsheba get pregnant?
呢個拔士巴嘅丈夫喺前線打緊仗，咁佢點解拔士巴點會大肚咧？
So what he did undercover, he thought would be exposed.
咁佢諗咩辦法嚟到係解決呢個問題咧？
Then he thought about something.
佢諗到啲嘢。
So he told his other soldier with Uriah, he said, "Whoa, this and this and this. So you all fight with Uriah to the front line. When you get to the front line, you'll see there's a lot of enemy soldiers. Without he knowing that, you all withdraw. And then leave Uriah alone be there. Then he will definitely be killed by the enemy."
咁佢諗到個辦法就係話，當你哋去前線打仗，同呢個烏利亞去前線打仗嘅時候，咁你哋成班軍人就褪後，等佢自己上去，咁佢就好容易就會俾人打死。
So David committed not only adultery, also murder.
大衛喺呢件事情當中，唔單止係犯咗奸淫嘅錯誤，而且犯咗謀殺。
And that's what happened.
呢個就係咁樣發生。
In 2 Samuel,
撒母耳記下
chapter 12,
喺12章裏邊，
the prophet Nathan came to King David,
呢個拿單先知嚟到呢個大衛面前，
rebuke him.
係責備佢。
Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you despise me, that's Yahweh God, and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own.
佢話：你既藐視我，娶了客人烏利亞的妻為妻，所以刀劍必永不離開你的家。
This is what the Lord says, out of your own household, I am going to bring calamity upon you. Before your very eyes, I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you, and he will lie with your wife in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel.
耶和華如此說：我必從你家中興起禍患攻擊你，我必在你眼前把你的妃嬪賜給別人，他在日光之下就與他們同枕。你在暗中行這事，我卻要在以色列眾人面前日光之下報應你。
What was David's reaction?
大衛嘅反應係點呢？
If it's Chinese emperor, what would be the reaction?
如果係呢一個中國嘅皇帝嘅時候，你估個中國皇帝會點樣反應呢？
How dare you, Nathan?
佢話：拿單，你竟大膽
Take him out and kill him, right?
你攞出去處斬。
But David's reaction is quite different.
但係大衛嘅反應係點樣呢？
Then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord.
大衛就同拿單講，佢話我得罪咗耶和華了。
He fell down and confessed his sin.
佢即係跪低嚟到係真係向神認錯。
And Nathan replied, The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. But because doing this, you have made the enemy of the Lord show utter contempt. The son born to you will die.
但係拿單就咁同佢講，佢話耶和華已經除掉你嘅罪，你必不致死，只是你行這事，叫耶和華的仇敵大得褻瀆的機會，故此你所得的孩子必定要死。
So indeed, the first son he had with the Bathsheba died.
咁佢同拔
In
士
the
巴，
Bible, the name was not even recorded.
佢同拔士巴懷孕生咗第一個仔，聖經裏邊都冇記載佢嘅名字，真係死咗。
And very interestingly, the second son with the Bathsheba,
咁第二個同拔士巴生嘅仔呢，
not only was alive,
唔單止佢係活着，
even Yahweh God Jehovah, loved him.
耶和華愛呢一個仔，
And David gave a name to that son, Solomon.
大衛就同佢安咗個名叫做所羅門。
He's recorded in chapter 12 and verse 24.
係記載喺呢一個12章嘅24節裏邊。
And Solomon's name really means peace.
所羅門呢個名其實個意思即係平安嘅意思。
In Hebrew, Solomon's name is pronounced Shlomo.
呢個頭先牧師講嘅就係呢個所羅門呢一個希伯來嗰個拼音，
It's directly from the term shalom.
其實就係同呢一個 shalom 呢個希伯來呢個字係一樣。
So what is the hindrance? What is the schism between us and God?
我哋究竟人同神嗰個關係究竟係有咩嘅隔阻呢？
How can we be reconciled with God and have peace?
我哋點樣先至可以同神同我哋嘅關係當中係有平安呢？
That's because man sins.
完全係因為我哋係犯咗罪嘅緣故。
Because we sin against God, so there was a schism. It's like a huge trench you can never get across.
呢一個人同神之間呢一個大鴻溝咧，就係因為我哋犯咗呢一個罪，我哋唔可以去到神嗰度。
For our life, our ultimate goal is to reconcile with God, have peace.
我哋嘅目的就係我哋希望我哋可以能夠係同神嚟到係和好。
So we have to confess our sin and repent.
我哋需要嚟到喺神面前去認錯悔改。
David was said to be the man after God's own heart because when he sees the sins, he repent, confess and repent.
點解神會話大衛係一個追求佢心意嘅人呢？就係因為當大衛犯罪嘅時候，佢知道佢自己犯罪，佢就去喺神面前度認
Then he
錯。
had peace with God, and the second son is called Shalom, Shlomo.
就係佢當神喺神面前認錯之後，佢有第二個仔就係叫做所羅門，係平安嘅意思。
So that is the background for the psalm we just read.
呢個就係我哋頭先讀過詩篇嗰個嘅背景。
And then continue on the history side.
咁繼續翻去睇下呢個歷史嘅背景。
And the King David really loved Solomon
呢個大衛王係好愛呢一個所羅門，
and promised Bathsheba, and he would make Solomon as the future king.
佢應承咗拔士巴就係話所羅門將來會成為一國之君。
So when King David is getting older,
大衛年紀老啦，
and King David actually has many sons.
大衛其實有好多個仔嘅。
Among his sons, some of his sons, such as Absalom, even revolt against him, want to kill him.
呢個
want to
佢有一個
be-
仔叫做押沙龍，佢係要反叛大衛。
And at the time when David was getting older, Adoniah was the oldest son, and Adoniah think, oh, I definitely will be the king.
咁佢有另外個仔叫亞多尼亞，佢就覺得佢自己係一個最大嘅、年紀最大嘅，應該我做皇帝啦。
So when David was old,
但係大衛老啦，
He was no longer be able to running the day-to-day business for the kingdom.
佢再冇能力嚟到係統治呢個國家。
And Adoniah, his oldest son, start to grab hold of the power
呢個亞多尼亞就想籠立大權，
and then try to declare himself as a king before even King David died.
咁啊喺大衛王未死之前呢，佢就想立自己做皇帝。
So David, as Bathsheba, and his son Solomon, and the prophet Nathan come together.
咁大衛同拔士巴同所羅門同呢個拿單喺埋一齊。
As people to bring the donkey, his own donkey, and put Solomon on the donkey, going around the city of Jerusalem and declare Solomon will be the king.
佢就將所羅門擺喺個驢子上邊，喺驢仔上邊，然後係周圍去行嘅時候咧，就話所羅門就會係以色列嘅皇帝。
But at that time, Solomon was pretty young,
當時候所羅門好年輕，
probably only a teenager.
可能係10零歲。
So when Solomon prayed to God, he said, Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. But I am only a little child, do not know how to carry out my duties.
佢嘅祈禱就係話：耶和華我的神啊，如今你使僕人接續我父親大衛作王，但我是幼童，不知道應當怎樣出入。
So we all one day, when we were young,
我哋每一個人都有一日都要死。
I love the song, One Day When We Were Young.
有當我哋年輕嗰一日，
One day when we were young, one morning in May, in Gay.
呢度係一首好出名嘅歌啊。
So
當我哋年輕嗰日，
King Solomon, when he was young, he really feared of the Lord, follow what his father King David taught him to follow the Lord, Yahweh.
所羅門當佢係年輕嘅時候，佢係跟從大衛嗰個嘅吩咐嚟到係跟從呢個耶和華。
And that's before if Solomon has so many wives.
就係當係所羅門未曾係娶咁多太太嘅時候。
So the Song of the Psalms or Song of Solomon is a song about the love between husband and wife, one husband and one wife.
呢個雅歌其實係講到一個丈夫同一位太太嘅之間嘅愛歌。
So it's not like a later date of Solomon, his reign. He has married so many wives from all different kingdoms so that he can expand his territory.
唔係話好似所羅門喺佢遲啲嘅時候咧，就係儲咗好多嘅太太嚟到係擴展佢嘅國度。
And the intention for those marriage is just for power.
而當時候佢嗰啲嘅婚姻目的係要增加佢嘅權勢。
But when Solomon was young, his love was pure.
當所羅門喺年輕嘅時候，佢對神嘅愛係好認真嘅。
So when we read the Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, to start with,
當我哋睇呢個雅歌嘅時候，
Solomon's Song of Songs, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. For your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like the perfume poured out. No wonder the young woman loved you. It's from Song of Songs, verse 1 to 3.
雅歌第1章第1至3節咁話：佢話所羅門嘅歌係歌中嘅雅歌，願他用口與我親嘴，因你的愛情比酒更美。你的膏油馨香，你的名如同倒出來的香膏，所以眾童女都愛你。
It's so beautiful.
一隻好美麗嘅詩歌，
It's a love return to the Garden of Eden.
就好似係翻去呢一個伊甸園裏邊嘅一
It's
個
a
嘅
one
愛，
man, one woman together forever.
係一個男人一個女人就係喺埋一齊，永遠。
So in Song of Psalms and chapter 3:11 even said, "Come out, your daughter Zion." So many of them. But look at the King Solomon wearing the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding. His wedding is only with one woman. Okay.
呢、個雅歌嘅3章第11節咁話，佢話錫安的眾女子啊，你們出去觀看所羅門王頭戴冠冕，就是他在他婚宴的日子，心中喜樂的時候，他母親給他戴上的。佢婚宴嘅時候只係娶一個太太啫。
So Song of Solomon or Song of Psalm is to celebrate the pure love between husband and wife, one man and one woman.
雅歌其實就係愛嚟慶祝一個男人同一個女人佢哋嘅婚姻。
So Song of Songs 6:3 says, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He grazed among the lilies.
雅歌6章第3節咁話：我屬我嘅良人，我嘅良人亦都係屬我。
I am my beloved's, singular and singular. My beloved is mine, singular and singular. Only one and one.
呢個我嘅良人係單數嘅，佢係我百合花中嘅牧放嘅群羊。
So it's ideal love between husband and wife returning to the Garden of Eden.
呢個就好似翻去伊甸園嘅時候，係亞當夏娃係一男一女。
Then as for the application and the interpretation of the Song of Solomon, traditionally among Jewish people, is a love of Yahweh to his people.
咁呢一個猶太人嘅傳統咧，就係呢個雅歌係愛嚟解作，就係話神對以色列民嘅一個愛。
And then in New Testament era,
喺呢個新約裏邊，
we know many times in the Gospel account and in the Revelation, we mention about the wedding feast of the Lamb.
我哋睇到福音書裏邊同埋啟示錄裏邊，好多時候都講到羔羊嘅婚宴。
The love of one husband and one wife is used as an analogy of a love of Christ and the church.
咁呢一個新郎同新娘佢哋嘅關係，就好多時候就愛嚟代表主耶穌基督同教會嘅關係。
It's a pure love and dedicated to one and only to one.
係一個純潔專一嘅愛。
So that is Solomon's use for love poetry.
所羅門寫嘅係佢啲年輕時候嘅一個嘅詩歌。
And then we move on to Proverbs.
咁我哋去到箴言啦。
Proverbs, if you use one word to describe Proverbs, you probably very naturally will think about wisdom, right?
呢個箴言好多時候我哋就講佢就係意思就係話一個智慧嘅書。
So the whole Proverbs really is about wisdom, and that's the pinnacle of Solomon, his reign and his life.
呢個箴言其實就係一個智慧嘅書卷，其實就係講到所羅門嘅時候，佢壯年嘅時候佢嘅巔峰。
As we read Solomon's Proverbs, from the very beginning he says, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel.
喺呢個箴言第1章第1節，佢話以色列王大衛兒子所羅門嘅箴言。
Also give the purpose of this Proverbs very clearly says, for gaining wisdom and instruction and understanding words of insight.
係要使人曉得智慧同埋訓誨，分辨通達嘅言語。
For receiving instruction and prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, so and so, so and so.
係使人處事領受智慧、仁義、公平、正直、訓誨等等。
So be wise, to have wisdom.
我哋係要有智慧。
That is the core message of the Proverbs.
呢個箴言個書嘅就係咁嘅意思。
But what is the real wisdom?
但係乜嘢係真正嘅智慧呢？
What is that compared to the wisdom under the sun?
咁同呢一個喺日光之下嘅智慧有咩分別呢？
What is the wisdom of difference between under the sun, above the sun?
咁喺日光之下同日光之上嘅智慧有咩分別呢？
If we still remember last week's sermon from Reverend Leon,
如果大家仲記得梁牧師講個講道嘅信息，
we have to be able to distinguish these two.
我哋要能夠分辨得出邊一樣係邊一樣。
For understanding proverbs and parables, the saying and the riddles of the wise, and verse 7, that's the key.
我哋要去明白呢啲一個奧秘咧，就係第7節就係呢個關鍵。
Let's read together verse 7.
我哋一齊讀第7節。
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but the fools despise wisdom and instruction. That's really in Cantonese.
敬畏耶和華是智慧的開端，愚妄人藐視智慧和訓誨。
Wisdom in the Proverbs is to fear of the law is beginning of the knowledge.
箴言裏邊所講嘅智慧嘅開端就係要敬畏耶和華。
Knowing the Holy One is wisdom.
認識至聖者呢個就係你嘅聰明。
So therefore, in verse 8, it says, "Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching."
第8節嗰度講到話：我兒要聽你父親的訓誨，不可離棄你母親的法則。
So that's the instruction King David gave to King Solomon. And King David and Solomon's mother Bathsheba passed on this legacy, spiritual legacy to Solomon. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching.
呢個就係
Fear of the Lord.
呢個就係大衛佢父親留俾佢一啲嘅教訓，就係話你要敬畏耶和華。
So let's turn to the history.
咁我哋又翻去歷史嗰度嚟睇。
Compare the history, read together history and the poetry.
我哋睇下歷史同詩篇一齊有睇。
And in history, the first king 2:1.
列王紀上2章1節。
When the time drew near for David to die, he gave a charge to Solomon his son.
就大衛嘅死期臨近啦，就囑咐他兒子所羅門說：
Yes, I am about to go the way of all the earth. So be strong, show yourself a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in his way, and keep his decrees and command, his laws and requirements, as written in the law of Moses, so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go.
佢話：我現在要走世人必走嘅路，所以你當剛強作大丈夫，遵守耶和華你神所吩咐的，照着摩西律法上所寫的行主的道，謹守他的律例誡命典章法度，這樣你無論做什麼事，不拘往何處去，盡都亨通。
And when David was about to die, he gave the most important instruction to his son Solomon.
大衛係就嚟死嘅時候，佢就吩咐將佢最重要嘅嘢嚟吩咐俾佢仔所羅門。
So here is the instruction. Then we turn to the poetry again, the Proverbs.
又翻去呢個箴言嗰度。
My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my command in your heart.
佢話：我兒啊，不要忘記我嘅法則，你心要謹守我嘅誡命。
For they will prolong your life many years and bring you prosperity.
因為他必將長久嘅日子、生命嘅年數和平安加給你。
Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck and write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man.
不可使慈愛誠實離開你，要係在你頸項上，刻在你心板上，這樣你必在神和世人眼前蒙恩寵，有聰明。
So, what was Solomon's reaction? So, Solomon listened to his father. King David taught him all this instruction. Then in chapter 4, beginning with, "Oh, listen, my sons." Then Solomon told his son, "My sons, to a father's instruction, his father's instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding. I give you sound learning, so do not forsake my teaching." When I was a boy. So when Solomon assumed the kingdom, he was a boy. When I was a boy in my father's house, still tender and only child of my mother. Then he taught me, said, "Lay hold of my words with all your heart. Keep my command and you will live." Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words and swivel from them.
咁呢個所羅門聽到佢大衛俾佢嘅吩咐，咁所羅門嘅反應係點呢？喺第4章裏邊咁講，佢話：眾子啊，要聽父親嘅教訓，留心得知聰明，因我所給你們的是好教訓，不可離棄我的法則， 我在父親面前為孝子，在母親眼中為獨一的嬌兒。父親教訓我說：你心要存記我的言語，遵守我的命令，便得存活。要得智慧，要得聰明，不可忘記，也不可偏離我口中的言語。
And so, what was the result? You can see.
咁結果係咩呢？
Because when during the pinnacle time and Solomon listened to his father's instruction to fear the Lord, to know the Holy One, so he built a temple for the Yahweh God.
所羅門因為佢真係聽大衛嘅吩咐，佢敬畏耶和華同埋認識至聖者，所以佢就係為耶和華起咗呢個聖殿。
And Yahweh God even appeared to him, spoke to him twice.
咁耶和華係同所羅門講過2次説話。
And Solomon was called the wisest king among all the ancient Near East kingdoms. And because his territory continued to extend his territory, many people want to come to his court and listen to his wisdom.
咁所羅門係被稱為當時候最有智慧嘅皇帝，所以好多人都要嚟呢度嚟到探訪佢。
But how come such as Solomon keeps saying that seeking for the wisdom to know the Holy One, but when he come to wrote the Ecclesiastes, what is the first words come out from Ecclesiastes and you remember?
喺呢個傳道書裏邊，第一個字大家記得佢講嘅係乜嘢嘢呢？
Vanity, is it?
空虛，
Meaningless.
冇意思嘅。
Because that is a Solomon's lamenting during his old age.
呢個就係所羅門晚年嘅時候，佢喺度嘆息。
What happened to him?
究竟發生咩事呢？
What happened to Solomon?
究竟所羅門發生咩
Let's
事？
turn to the history.
又翻返去呢一個歷史度睇下啦。
First King,
列王紀上
chapter 11.
11章，
Solomon has 700 wives and royal births and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray.
所羅門有妃700都是公主，還有賓300，這些妃嬪誘惑他的心。
As Solomon grew old, his wife turned his heart after other gods. His heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, and the heart of David his father had been.
所羅門年老嘅時候，佢嘅妃嬪誘惑佢嘅心，去隨從別神，不效法他父親大衛，誠誠實實地信服耶和華他的神。
And what was the result?
結果點呢？
And verse 9.
第9節。
And the Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord and the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice.
耶和華向所羅門發怒，因為他心偏向他2次顯現的耶和華以色列的神。
And verse 11, so the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates.
喺11節嗰度講嘅就話，所以耶和華對他說：你既行了這事，不遵守我所吩咐你守的約和律例，我必將你的國奪回，賜給你的臣子。
Then we turn to the Ecclesiastes
翻返去傳道書，
and we read the meaningless, said the teacher.
我哋睇到
Vanity of vanities, said the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanities.
喺度講到話空虛的空虛，空虛的空虛，凡事都是空虛。
Why?
點解呢？
Everything he owned
佢所有擁有嘅一切，
overnight, and God Yahweh can take away.
喺一夜之間，耶和華可以將佢全部攞走。
He thought he has everything, right?
佢以為佢有擁有一切，
But overnight can be emptiness.
但係神可以喺佢一夜之間，讓佢一無所有。
Therefore, when we read the Ecclesiastes, we have to read the prelude says, the words of the teacher, the son of David, the king of is Jerusalem.
我哋讀到係傳道書第1章第1節嘅時候，佢話係耶路撒冷作王大衛嘅兒子傳道者嘅言語。
Vanity of vanities.
虛空的虛空。
What is profit has a man of all his labor which take under the sun? Here's the key word, under the sun.
咁喺呢一個日頭之下、日光之下，究竟係咩事呢？
Under the sun, you can own everything you want.
喺日光之下，你可以去賺取所有一切嘅嘢。
Under the sun, you can control everything you can.
喺日光之下，你可以去嘗試去控制所
Under
有
the
一切。
sun, you can make all the money you can own.
喺日光之下，你可以賺所有你賺到嘅錢。
But if you deviate from God's command, if you go astray from God Yahweh overnight, everything is empty of empties, empty of empties.
但係當你離開主嘅訓誨嘅時候，你就會係變為虛空虛空。
So, under the sun, that's the key word, so important.
呢個主要嘅嗰個詞就係話日光之下。
Verse 4, one generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever.
第4節嗰度講話，一代過去，一代又嚟，地卻永遠長。
One generation passes away, King David passes away, right? One generation comes, King Solomon comes.
一代過去，大衛死咗啦，咁然後一代嚟，所羅門
What's the
嚟啦。
next?
咁之後點呢？
King Solomon comes, this generation, and another generation take over him.
所羅門嚟，但係另外有一代又會再取代所羅門。
So after Solomon died, his kingdom was split to two.
咁所羅門死咗之後，佢個聯合嘅國度就會分開為二。
Northern kingdom took 10 tribes.
呢個10支派喺呢個北國裏邊。
So when we read the Ecclesiastes, we need to know the background, so we understand.
當我哋睇傳道書嘅時候，我哋要明白個背景，幫助我哋能夠更加了解。
Because otherwise we will be at loss when we read the verse 17.
如果唔係，我哋睇，尤其是好似我哋睇17節嘅時候，我哋會一頭霧水。
Interesting, huh? Let's read, say, from verse 13, 12 to 17. He says, and therefore, I'm the preacher, was a king over Israel in Jerusalem. I devote myself to study and explore by wisdom all that is done under the heaven, and what is heavy burden God has laid on man. But 14, verse 14, I have seen all the things that's done under the sun, all them are meaningless, a chasing after wind.
呢度佢話：我傳道者在耶路撒冷作過以色列王，我專心用智慧尋求查究天下所做的一切事，乃知神叫世人所經練的是極重的勞苦。我見日光之下所做的一切事都是虛空，都是暴風，
including wisdom.
包括埋智慧。
Verse 17 and 18.
第17
Then I
18
apply myself to understanding of wisdom and also the madness and folly. I learned that this is, too, is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief.
呢度講佢話：我又專心察明智慧、狂妄和愚昧，乃知這也是暴風。因為多有智慧就多有愁煩，加增知識的就加增憂傷。
So if you read the Ecclesiastes and the Proverbs without knowing the context, it's in direct conflict, isn't it?
但係當你睇呢個箴言同埋呢一個傳道書嘅時候，咁你睇見好似兩個好似有啲矛盾喎。
In Proverbs, you need to look and search the wisdom.
箴言
All
話
things is about wisdom.
箴言係完全係講係智慧去尋找智慧。
But how come in Ecclesiastes says, oh, even the wisdom is chasing after the wind?
但係呢一個傳道書裏邊講到就係話尋找智慧都好似暴風一樣咧。
So where's the dividing line?
究竟嗰條分界線喺邊？
Where is the distinction
有咩分別？
under the sun and above the sun?
係日光之下同日光之上。
Under the sun, which Solomon has chasing after the wind for so many years, all the wisdom, the cleverness, craftiness under the sun is just chasing after the wind.
所羅門所謂尋求嘅智慧，就係日光之下呢啲嘢，全部都一切都係好似
But in
無風。
Proverbs, what is the wisdom?
但係箴言裏邊嘅智慧係乜嘢？
The fear of the Lord is beginning of the knowledge, and knowing the Holy One is wisdom.
箴言裏邊話：佢話敬畏耶和華係智慧嘅開端，認識至聖者就係聰明。
So that's the wisdom above the sun.
呢個就係智慧喺在日光之上。
If we read Ecclesiastes without knowing the context, we'll apply it into a wrong direction.
嗱，當我哋睇傳道書，我哋係唔用一個正確嘅角度去睇嘅時候咧，我哋就
So
睇
for
錯咗。
Ecclesiastes, probably one of the most important passage is from here.
呢個喺傳道書裏邊最重要嘅一段嘅經文就喺度，
Chapter 12, verse 1 and 2.
係第12章第1同第2節。
Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble comes and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light, the moon and star grow dark, and the cloud return after the rain. Let's read together in Cantonese.
我哋大家一齊有讀中文啊！你趁着年幼衰敗的日子尚未來到，就是你所說我毫無喜樂的那些年日，未曾臨近之先，當紀念做你的主。不要等到日頭光明，月亮星宿變為黑暗，雨後雲彩返回。
So that's the key.
呢個係個關鍵。
Under the sun, above the sun.
日光之下同日光之上。
Fear of the Lord is the beginning of the knowledge.
敬畏耶和華係智慧嘅開端，
Knowing the Holy One is the wisdom.
認識至聖者便是聰明。
So we just pause in the Proverbs chapter 3. Let's continue. We just read to verse 5, right? Continue. What is the instruction after all? That is in Psalm chapter 3.
呢個詩篇第3喺呢個箴言第3篇裏邊，究竟係講咩呢？
We just read up to verse 4, right? And continue to verse 5 and 6.
我哋要啱啱頭先我哋係讀咗第4節，我哋要繼續埋第5、第6節。
Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make you pass straight.
喺度話佢話你要專心仰賴耶和華，不可依靠自己嘅聰明，在你一切所行嘅事上都要認定他，他必指引你的路。
That is Father's instruction from King David to Solomon.
呢個就係大衛對所羅門嘅吩咐，
And we shall never forget.
我哋千祈唔好忘記。
And the last 8 verses from Proverbs 3, verse 5, all the way to 12 are so precious. Let's read together whatever the language you prefer. I will read in English.
我哋或者用
You can read
英
whatever
文或者
language.
係
Let's read together.
廣東話一齊嚟到讀，因為第3章第5至到第12節係一段好有意思嘅經文，我哋一齊無論咩原意一齊嚟到讀，好冇？
Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make you pass straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with your first fruits of your own crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vat will bring over with you new wine. My son, do not despise the Lord's disciplines, and do not resent His rebuke, Because the Lord disciplines those he loves. As a father, the son he delights in. Shall we pray?
我哋一齊祈禱。
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you.
天父上帝，我哋多謝你。
We thank you through Solomon, his poetries.
我哋多謝你藉住所羅門一啲嘅詩篇，
He recorded the instruction from his father and his mother, King David and Bathsheba.
你係記載咗係大衛同拔士巴教訓所羅門一啲嘅吩咐。
Fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge.
敬畏耶和華就係智慧嘅開端，
Knowing the Holy One is wisdom.
認識至聖者便是聰明。
O Lord,
主
let
啊，
us have the wisdom above the sun,
讓我哋能夠可以得到呢個日光之上嘅智慧，
because everything under the sun without you is just vanity of vanities.
因為日光之下無論係乜嘢嘅嘢，如果唔喺你冇你喺裏邊嘅時候，乜嘢都係虛空。
We thank you. We pray in Jesus Christ's name.
多謝你，我哋奉主耶穌嘅名求，
Amen.
阿門。